Hello and welcome to Max and Tillison. Well guys, we are doing this multi-part paint series and we are going to reproduce the Harley-Davidson paint job of the 1971 Harley-Davidson XLCH Sportster Sparkling America. Now we're going to review parts 1 and 2 first, and we're going to get into part 3, which is going to be about high build primers and about paint compatibilities. And we're also going to talk about preparing our shop for a nice clean environment before we start spraying that beautiful paint on and all those beautiful clear coats. So let's start a review of part 1 and 2 and jump into part 3. Hello and welcome to Max and Tillison. We are going to apply the factory 1971 Sparkling America paint job, and we have to do a lot of preparation work before we get to that point. In part 1, you see me acid wash the inside of the fuel tanks to get the rust out, and that acid wash revealed a few pinholes underneath the gas tank here. You've seen me go ahead and silver solder and how to do that, and to fill in and repair all those pinholes in the bottom of my fuel tank. I had a couple of small dings in both of the fuel tanks, and I had a shallow dent on one side, and I showed you how to fill those and how to body fill those and how to block sand your body filler down flat and as even as you possibly can with the bare steel surface. And then after we did that, we had to go ahead and fix a couple of dings in my rear fender and also in my front fender. I had a couple inverted dents, and I had to use some small body hammers and push those inverted dents down flat, and then finish it off with a very, very light skim of Bondo to make it nice and even. After we did that, I had to repair 2 holes that someone drilled in my back fender. I had to weld in a couple of tiny steel plates in the back and then fill in the area with some silver solder and grind the silver solder nice and flat to where we have a nice flat repair area. Okay, after all that hard work, we're all finished, and the fenders and the fuel tanks have been black sanded. All the Bondo has been black sanded nice and smooth. Now it's time to get into the high build primer, and I'm going to show you why that I'm using high build primer on these 2 fenders and the fuel tanks. So let's go over to the whiteboard, and I drew up a little sketch on the whiteboard, and I'm going to show you exactly why that I'm using high build primer on both of the fuel tanks and the rear fender and the front fender. So let's get started and go to the whiteboard. Why that I'm using high build primer on my body filler area and on my bare steel on my fuel tank. Okay, you've seen me go ahead and apply the body filler, and you've seen me go ahead and sand it nice and smooth and then finalize it, and I block sanded all the body filler as flat as I can to the bare steel. The paint's going to reveal where I have a body filler repair and where it begins and where it ends, okay? And it's going to reveal where the bare steel is, where it begins and where it ends, right here. And even though I didn't feel any edges after I block sanded all the Bondo repair, I thought it was perfectly flat to the bare steel. Well, that's really not the case, because as I said, if you don't use a high build primer over the top of that body fill repair and your bare steel, well, that paint is going to reveal the edges after I block sanded all the Bondo repair. I thought it was perfectly flat to the bare steel. Well, that's really not the case, because as I said, if you don't use a high build primer over the top of that body fill repair and your bare steel, well, that paint is going to reveal where the body filler begins and ends, or any low spots or any high spots, and it's going to reveal where your bare steel starts and ends as in relation to the body filler repair. So what your high build primer is going to do, it's going to elevate your bare steel surface to your body filler surface, and you're going to have a nice, beautiful transitional line going from your bare steel surface to your body filler surface. So that high build primer is going to even things out, so the outside of your fuel tank is very, very even on the outside, and that filler primer is going to encapsulate the whole fuel tank into a nice, hard, even shell. So that's why we use a high build primer. Now I'm going to end up probably using somewhere between 4 to 6 coats of high build primer. It may come out a little bit rough, and if that happens, it's no big deal. You let the high build primer dry up, and I usually let it dry until it's very hard and cured, and then I'll start wet sanding it. And I'll probably use, depending on how rough it is, start with about 800 wet dry sandpaper, and then once I get it kind of flat, I'm going to go over to about 1,000 grit wet dry sandpaper, and I'll take all the orange peel out of the high build primer. After that, it's ready for your first paint job, and then the clear coat over the top of that. Okay, so that's why we're using high build primer. We're going to even out the bare steel, and we're going to elevate that to meet any body filler you have, and it's also going to fill in any scratches that you have in your bare steel. They do have a prep you can use and prep spray your bare steel, but with the high build primer you don't really have to do that. It's all ready to use right on the bare steel, so that's what I'm going to do. I've done this before and it works out beautifully. Okay, let's go back to the fuel tanks. As I was saying, the high build primer is to build up the steel to meet the body filler repair, so we have a beautiful transitional straight line going from the bare steel on to the body filler repair. And then it's going to go beyond that. So after I use the high build primer, you're never going to be able to see where the repair area is, where it begins, where it ends, or where the bare steel is, where it begins and where it ends in relation to the body filler. It's going to raise everything up nice and even, and it's going to encapsulate the whole fuel tank into a nice, beautiful, hard shell, and it's going to prepare everything, the fenders and the tanks, for a nice, beautiful, high-end paint job. Now I have a high-quality, high solids primer, and it's in gray. Okay, this is a high build primer. You could use this over bare steel. It has all the instructions back here. I'll kind of bring you in close right there, and it explains to you that this can be used to build up surfaces so they're nice and even and smooth, and it also explains to you that you could use this over bare steel. And the great thing about it, as I said before, it builds in all the scratches you may have in the bare steel, or if the bare steel has any kind of crazy little areas in there that are a little bit raised, it's going to even those out. It's going to encapsulate the whole tank into a nice high build primer shell, which will make it ready for the paint job. After we wet sand that high build primer with about 1,000 grit, take out all the orange peel and prepare it for the paint job and for the clear coat. Now the high build primer comes with a hardener. This is an activator, and there's different kinds of activators. Now I'll be priming this tank in about mid 70 temperature, about 75, 78 degrees or something like that. So I went with the mid temperature activator, which will be mixed in 4-to-1 with my high build primer. So I'll show you how to do that when I get ready to mix and get ready to spray the high build primer on the tanks and both the fenders. So say if the temperature is about 90, 95 and up, and it's really hot outside, and then you would probably want to go with an activator that is not going to dry as quickly like a mid-temperature activator will. Or on the opposite end of that, say you're spraying your primer or your paint in the temperatures in the low 60s or the mid 60s to the high 60s, and then you want to use an activator that's going to dry a little bit quicker, because you don't want bugs and dirt to be flying into your wet primer or into your wet paint job. So there's different activators that you use for your primer and for your paint. As we're talking about primers or about paints, there's one really important word you're going to have to get through your head. It's about compatibility. Okay? The brands have to match. This activator brand has to match this high build primer brand. Or if you're going to use a certain brand paint, thinners you're going to use have to match the brand of the paint. So it's about compatibility. You never mix brands, because if you use a different brand activator with a different brand paint or a different brand primer, you're going to have a disaster on your hands. And many times it's never going to dry. Your primer is never going to dry, or your paint job is never going to dry. You'll have a disaster, and you're going to have to strip all that very expensive material that you just sprayed on. You're going to have to strip it all off. So remember, guys, it's all about compatibility. So all the primer and paint materials that you use in your paint job have to be totally compatible. So one thing you got to remember is that when you're doing a paint job, you're using high-end paints, very expensive paint materials. It's all about compatibility. The brands have to match. You cannot mix brands. You can't mix a different brand of activator into a different brand of primer, or you can't mix a different brand of activator into a different brand of paint. Everything has to be compatible. And also that your urethane brand has to be compatible with any paint you have to thin out. Okay, if you got a 3-to-1 or maybe you got a 2-to-1, well, the urethane thinner has to match the brand of your paint. And your paint has to match all your urethane thinners, okay? Everything has to match. It's all about compatibility. So don't think about mixing brands of paint with different brands of urethane thinners or different activators. You always should buy the same brand that is going to be totally compatible with each other. So don't be shy when you're over the counter talking to your paint guy. You make darn well sure that he's giving you a matching set of your activator, your primer, your activator, and your paint, and your urethane reducer, and your paint. All of that has to match. Compatibility. You got to remember that. Compatibility. Okay? Don't be afraid to talk to your paint guy. Ask him to write if you got to mix maybe 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 or maybe 4-to-1. Sometimes you have the instructions on the back of your paint can. Hey, and sometimes you don't. So while I'm there over the paint counter, I am picking the brain of my paint guy while I'm there. And I'm not shy about it because I'm paying a lot of money for all these materials. And I want to make darn sure that I know that I got the proper ratios on my activator to my primer, my activator to my paint, and all my reducers. I have to know what the ratios are on my reducers to my paint. And I have to know all this. So what I make them do is take out a magic marker, just like this here, and go, it's going to be 4-to-1 on the activator. And on my paint cans and my reducers, it's going to be the same way. I make them take out a magic marker to mark it's going to be 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, or maybe it's going to be 2-to-1-to-1. You'll have 2 parts of paint and maybe 1 part of hardener or activator. Okay? So you want to make sure that you pick his brain and you get all the information out, make him write it all down right on the cans so there's no mistakes. So you may have 2-to-1-to-1, and make sure that he writes all that pertinent information down on your primer can lid and your paint can lids, or your activator and your paint and all of that, because these are awful expensive materials, and sometimes they don't give you all that information on the back of your paint can. Okay, you may have to go online and look that stuff up. So while I'm there, I make doggone sure that I'm picking the brain of my paint guy, and that he's writing down all the pertinent ratios of the paint and the thinners and the hardeners. Okay, so I know exactly when I'm going to mix this. I know what I'm doing, and I know it's going to be 4-to-1, or it's going to be 3-to-1-to-1, or it's going to be 2-to-1-to-1, or something like that. So I know all the information, so it makes it nice and easy. All right, guys, while you're at your paint shop picking up all your expensive materials, make sure your paint guy throws in a lot of mixing sticks and ask for about maybe 6 mixing cups with all the ratios on them. And all the filters you have to filter your primers and your paints and your clear coats with. And make sure he gives you everything. Now those items that I just mentioned should be free. Now those items that I just mentioned should not cost you anything. He should throw them in. After all, you're buying a lot of expensive thinners and hardeners and primers and paints, and those are not cheap. The least he can do is throw in some mixing sticks and some ratioed mixing cups, about 6 of them or maybe 8 of them, and your paint filters. That's the least your paint guy can do for you. Okay? So don't be shy about that stuff. Make sure you ask for this stuff. You make a list of your paints, your activators, your primers, and all your thinners, and all your paint cups, and your sticks, and your filters. And as I said, it's about compatibility, guys. All about compatibility. Everything has to match. Okay? Never mix brands, ever. And also, in this particular video, as I said before, we are going with the 1971 Harley-Davidson Sportster XLH Sparkling America paint scheme. I have the graphics for that, so when I get through putting on my birch white paint that I had custom mixed just for this particular paint job, we're going to let that dry and start to apply our 1971 Sparkling America, all the graphics, all the decals on the fuel tank and on the fenders. And we'll go through that video as well. So this is going to be a multi-part series on applying not just the Sparkling America paint scheme, but as doing paint jobs, you know, how to do professional quality paint job in your garage, getting professional results. And I'm taking you guys step by step. And one of the most important things in achieving a professional quality paint job at home is all about preparation, whether it's in the home or it's in a high-end professional shop. It's all about professional preparation. Whether it's home or it's in a shop, you must prepare the surfaces. And what I'm showing you in part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on, is step by step how to do all the prep work before we actually get into spraying primers and actually begin to spraying those beautiful paint tones and the beautiful clear coats. So stay tuned to the series. We'll go step by step, and we're going to get into a high-end professional paint job at home in your garage. We'll go into that step by step. Okay, in the next video, I'm going to show you how to go over your spray gun. And we're going to change over from a clear and paint spray needle to a primer paint needle. Okay, you have to change those over. Okay, because this is very thick, high build primer, and we're going to need a bigger opening in our spray needles to exit out this hard build primer. So we'll go through that as well. I'm going to show you how to put your spray gun together, how to prepare your air tanks and your pressure gauges, filters going into your air lines. And we're going to cover all of that stuff as we get into the paint jobs. And we're also, once we get into the paint jobs and into the primer sprays, we are going to go through the times between coats, how long we have to wait and why we have to wait that long. And I'm also going to get into the actual paint, how to lay that down, and how to lay down all the clear coats. And after the clear coat, on the last coat of clear coat, I'm going to get into how to lay down your final coat of clear coat and to make a glass smooth right out of your spray gun, so you never have to wet sand your nice beautiful clear, and you'll never have to buff it. It's going to come out as clear and it's going to come out as flat as a piece of glass right out of your spray gun. And I'll teach you the technique that I use to make it lay as flat and beautiful like a piece of glass right out of your spray gun. Well, this is one of the preparations I do before I do a paint job. I'll empty the garage out and I'll clean everything out of it, which is a good thing to do. And then I power wash the floors and even some of the walls a little bit, and garage doors on the inside, and even some of the rafters, really. I gave them a light dusting with the power washer. And of course, inside the garage door, and I guarantee you, when I'm doing a paint job, I will not have a fan going in here, that's for sure. The air's got to be nice and still. And I like to paint on a rainy day, actually, because on a windy day, the garage is shaking around a little bit, and all these dust particles are flying in your paint job all over the place. So I always paint, I try to paint at least, on days with a very light mist rain, and there's no wind, and it's nice and calm. And I tell you, that's the best time to paint, because it tamps down all the dust outside and on the garage roof, your garage, while you're trying to do a nice quality paint job. So I got it all nice and clean now, and it's all ready to go. Now to put everything back. Thank God for this little power washer. I've been using this baby for years on everything around here. There's nothing like it. Okay, one of the first things that I do before I begin my paint job is I go underneath my air compressor and I unscrew the valve underneath the air compressor, and I drain all the water and all the moisture out of the bottom, because you don't want that to go through your air lines and to ruin your paint job. So even though you have a filter that's in line with your spray gun, you still want to drain your air compressor, get under there, and just get all that moisture out of there and all that water out of there, okay? And that's one of the first things that I always do. So that's very, very important. So don't forget to do this. This is one of the important steps you have to do before you begin your paint job. Okay, one of the things that I do is use 4mm clear plastic, and I'll drape that over my plywood tables here, where I'll be spray painting my gas tanks and my fenders, and that's going to help keep the dust away from my paint work, because I don't want the air pressure from my gun to bounce off and deflect off this wood and come straight up into my paint job. So this 4mm plastic is going to keep all that dirt away from my paint job. It's a nice clean surface. Okay, one thing I would like to add, guys, is one of my gas tanks that I had, this is an original Harley Davidson 2.2 gas tank. This had a purple paint job on it, and so I never liked it, and I wanted to strip it down. As long as I'm doing my 1971 Sparkling America paint scheme, and I had birch white paint, I thought that I would strip this purple paint job off of this tank, bring it down to bare steel and do all the body work on it, and just put it right alongside my other gas tank while I'm spraying primer, and primer it in, you know. So what I did, I had applied this Aircraft Ultra paint remover onto the purple paint job. Now, it went through the clear coat and the purple paint pretty easily, and there was no problem. But once it got to the high build primer that was underneath the clear coat and the purple paint, it wouldn't even touch that high build primer. So I had to take the garden hose and wash all this aircraft paint remover off. I began to wet sand it with a pretty aggressive wet sandpaper, and that was getting kind of boring, and I'm losing patience. So what I actually did, I had a 3M abrasive pad here. This is from 3M, this one right here, and a smaller one. And I began to put that into a drill chuck and began to start taking off all the high build epoxy primer that was on this fuel tank, and it made the process of starting to remove all that high build primer off the fuel tank. And this abrasive pad did not even scratch up the bare steel at all. It didn't really bother it, so that was no big deal. But that's what I had to do to remove the purple paint job that was on here. It was all full of nicks. The nicks were so deep they were going down right into the high build primer. So you would have to sand through the clear coat, sand through the primer, and sand through the color and everything, you know. So I decided just go ahead and strip it all down and reveal any kind of repair areas, which I found a few of them. And then I started from fresh and did my own body work and black sanded everything smooth and stripped everything down here, as you can see. So this is going to be ready for some high build primer and whatever color that I decide to spray this tank with. I may go with a real old Harley Davidson Sportster paint scheme, you know, maybe dating back to maybe 1963 or 64 or something like that. I'm not sure yet. Or I just may leave it in primer and decide what I'll do with it next. But as far as stripping it down, well, this aircraft paint remover is only good enough to take off the clear coat and the purple paint. It didn't even affect the high build primer. It didn't even touch it. So I had to get down and do some muscle work to get that high build primer off of this original 2.2 fuel tank. So just to let you know, guys, this aircraft remover is not going to take off that high build primer. It's just not going to work. And so get ready to do some elbow grease and maybe get some of these 3M abrasive pads. You can put them in a drill and start getting down and dirty with it and get all that high build primer off right down to the bare steel. So I hope that little tip's going to help you guys out. All right, next week we're going to get into mixing up some primer and teach you how to read some of these ratio cups. It's pretty easy. And we'll get into that as well and some other basic things, setting up your spray gun. And we're going to shoot some primer as well. So we'll do all that and take you step by step. And I'm gearing this multi-part video series to a lot of you guys who've never painted before and just want to look at some of the basic steps on how to do your own paint job at home and to get professional results in the process and get you started off on the right foot. Okay, there's a lot of professionals out there who really has some great tips and tricks out there, but I wanted to keep it simple and get you started off on the right foot. So come on and tune in to part 4 next week, and we'll get into ray guns and read your paint ratio cups and start mixing up some paint. And we'll get into more after that, start spraying some primer and do other things as well. So I'll see you guys next week. You take good care of yourselves, and thank you again for watching Max and Tilson. Hey, don't forget to subscribe as well. I'd really appreciate it. It would really help out the channel. Take care, guys.